राधा गोकुल नंद की, सीताराम लक्ष्मण हनुमान की, श्री गो निताय की, राधा दामोदर की, मदर यशोदा। नमो विश्वाराम सच्चे आनंद रूपम सुंदरम गोकुल हे ब्रजमानम। नमो विश्वाराम सच्चे नमो ईश्वरां सच्चे आनन्दरूपं रसकुण्डलं गोकुले ब्रजमानम्। रसकुण्डलं गोकुले ब्रजमानम्। यशोदा लोकलाघवमानम् परं गतम् अत्यन्ततो धृत्य गोप्या। यशोदा लोकलाघवमानम् परं रसम् अत्यन्ततो धृत्य गोप्या। रुदन्तमोहनेत्रा योगनामजान्तं कराम्बुजायेकमेना शतान्तनेत्रम्। रुदन्तमोहनेत्रं युग्मजान्तं कराम्बुजायेकमेना शतान्तनेत्रम्। मुहुश्वासकं पात्रे रेखाङ्ककान्ता सीताग्रे वदामोदतां भक्तिव्रताम्। मुहुश्वासकं पत्रे रेखाङ्ककान्ता स्थिताग्रे वदामोदतां भक्तिव्रताम्। इति दृक्ष्वलीलाभे आनन्दकुन्दे स्वघोषं निमज्जं तम् आख्यापयन्तम्। इति दृक्ष्वलीलाभिरानन्दकुन्दे आख्यापयन्तम्। इति दृक्ष्वलीलाभिरानन्दकुन्दे स्वघोषं निमज्जं तम् आख्यापयन्तम्। तदीये सीताग्ने भक्तिजिता त्वं Punam prema taspam sata vrittivrande Varam deva moksham na moksham vadim va Nachanya vrineyam varishada Varam deva moksham Varam deva moksham na moksham vadim va Nachanya vinayam varishada piya Idam te vapurnata gopal balam Sada me manasya varatam kimanya Idam te vapurnata gopal balam Sada me manasya varatam kimanya Idam te vapurnata gopal balam Dame manasya viratam kimanya Idam te mokham bhojam atyanta nille Vratam kuntalaik snigdha raktasya gopya Idam te mukham bhojam atyanta nille Vratam kuntalaik snigdha raktasya gopya Muhustumbitam bimaratnam varam me Manasya virastam alam lakshalavi Muhustumbitam Namo Deva Damoda Ananta Vishnu Prasido Prabodhu Pujala Bhimagnam Namo Deva Damodar Ananta Vishnu Prasida Prabodhu Jala Bhimagnam Vipadrista Vrityati Dinam Batanu Sahane Samam Agnyam Edakshya Drasya Kuveratma Jaubatya Mutyaiva Yadva Swayamocitau Bhakti Bhajakritau Cha Tatha prema bhaktim swakame prayacha न मोक्षगृहो मे दामोदरे तथा प्रेम तथा प्रेम भक्तिं स्वाकामे प्रयाच न मोक्षगृहो मे दामोदरे नमस्ते सुदाम्ने सुरादिक्तिदाम्ने स्वदीयोदरयाथ विश्वस्यदाम्ने नमस्ते सुदाम्ने नमस्ते सुदाम्ने सुरादिक्तिदाम्ने स्वदीयोदरयाथ विश्वस्यदाम्ने नमो राधिकाय तदिया प्रियाय नमो नमो राधिकाय तदिया प्रियाय नमो अनंत लीलाय देवाय तुभ्यं 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 हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 रामा राम राम हरे 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 कृष्णा राम हरे राम 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 हरे हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे ओ हरे राम हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम राम Hare Krishna. Oh, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Jaya Radha Damodar, Radha Damodar, Radha Damodar, Radhe Radhe. Jaya Radha Damodar, Radha Damodar, Radha Damodar, Jaya Radha Damodar, Radha Damodar, Radha Damodar, Radhe Radhe. Jaya Yashoda Damodar, Yashoda Damodar, Yashoda Damodar, Yashoda Damodar. Jaya Radha Gokul Nanda Radha Gokul Nanda Radha Gokul Nanda Radhe Radhe. Jaya Radha Madan Mohan Radha Madan Mohan Radha Madan Mohan Radhe Radhe. Jaya Radha Govinda Radha Govinda Radha Govinda Radhe Radhe. Jaya Radha Gopinath Radha Gopinath Radha Gopinath Radhe Radhe. Jaya Radha Gokul Nanda Radha Gokul Nanda Radha Gokul Nanda Radhe Radhe. Jaya Radha Nandan Swar Radha Nandan Swar Radha Nandan Swar Radhe Radhe. Jaya Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman Jaya Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman. Jaya Goranita Jaya Goranita. Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada. Gurudev 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev Jaya Jaya Gurudev. Sai Gaur Premanande.
To the Supreme Lord, whose form is the embodiment of eternal existence, knowledge and bliss, whose shark-shaped earrings are swinging to and fro, who is beautifully shining in the divine realm of Gokula, who I, due to the offense of breaking the pot of yogurt that his mother was churning into butter, and then stealing the butter that was kept hanging from a swing, is quickly running from the wooden grinding motor in fear of Mother Yashoda, but who has been caught from behind by her, who ran after him with greater speed. To that Supreme Lord Sri Damodar, I offer my respectful, humble obeisances. Seeing the whipping stick in his mother's hand, he is crying and rubbing his eyes again and again with his two lotus hands. His eyes are filled with fear, and the necklace of pearls around his neck, which is marked with 3 lines like a conch shell, is shaking because of his quick breathing due to crying. To this Supreme Lord Sri Damodar, whose belly is bound not with rope but his mother's pure love, I offer my humble obeisances. By such childhood pastimes as this, he is drowning the inhabitants of Gokul in pools of ecstasy, and is revealing to those devotees who are absorbed in knowledge of his supreme majesty and opulence, that he is only conquered by devotees whose pure love is imbued with intimacy and is free from all conceptions of awe and reverence. With great love, I again offer my obeisances to Lord Damodar hundreds and hundreds of times. O Lord, although you are able to give all kind of benedictions, I do not pray to you for the boon of impersonal liberation, nor the highest liberation of eternal life in Vaikuntha, nor any other boon, which may be obtained by executing the 9 processes of bhakti. O Lord, I simply wish that this form of yours as Bal Gopal in Vrindavan may ever be manifest in my heart. For what is the use of me? So what is the use to me of any other boon besides this? O Lord, your lotus face, which is encircled by locks of soft black hair, tinged with red, is kissed again and again by Mother Yashoda, and your lips are reddish like the bimba fruit. May this beautiful vision of your lotus face be ever manifest in my heart. Thousands and thousands of other benedictions are of no use to me. O Supreme Godhead, I offer my obeisances unto you, O Damodar, O Ananta, O Vishnu, O Master, O my Lord, be pleased upon me. By showering your glance of mercy upon me, deliver this poor ignorant fool who is immersed in an ocean of worldly sorrows and become visible to my eyes. O Lord Damodar, just as the 2 sons of Kuvera, Managriva and Nalakuver, were delivered from the curse of Narad and made into great devotees by you in your form as a baby tied with rope to a wooden grinding mortar, in the same way, please give to me your own Prema Bhakti. I only long for this and have no desire for any kind of liberation. O Lord Damodar, I first of all offer my obeisances to the brilliantly effulgent robe which binds your belly. I then offer my obeisances to your belly, which is the abode of the entire universe. I humbly bow down to your most beloved Srimati Radharani, and I offer all obeisances to you, the Supreme Lord, who displays unlimited pastimes. Shri Shri Radha Damodar Bhagwan ki Jai.
Namaste Narasimhaya. Namaste Narasimhaya. शीलाटंकान खालाये ईतो नरसिंहो परतो नरसिंहो यातो यतो यमितातो नरसिंहो Hridaye Narsingho Narasinghamadhim Sharanam Prapade Tavakara Kamala Bare Natham Adhuta Shringam Hiranyakashipu Tanubringam Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. श्री नरसिंहदेव भगवान की, प्रहलाद महाराज की, गौर प्रेमानंदे।
Meditates behind me like the tune now, which you'll see. But that's actually my fiance out there. I also call her Dee sometimes because her name is Jessie. Sometimes I call her Dee and she's no, she's Bulgarian. That was the very telling you about the other day. He's always seen how being a monkey often. Back in the horrible days. Yeah. I haven't Actually, one of them is mine. Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Yes, it's working now. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Stotra Shatashi Srimad Isi Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Shri Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shyam Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Navadweep Mai Budham Ki Jai Shri Mathura Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Yamuna Mai Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaura Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. So, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and to speak a little something on today's verse, which is verse 8.1. And I ask for your blessings so I can do justice to this wonderful verse for my own purification. So, we are looking at the first verse from the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. I'll just say the Sanskrit of the verse. Arjuna Vacha Kim Tad Brahma Kim Adhyatmam Kim Karma Purushottama Adi Bhutam Cha Kim Proktam Adi Devam Kim Uchyate. So I'm going to... Sorry? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So I'm going to say the verse in sections, and if you want to repeat after me. Arjuna Vacha Kim Tad Brahma Kim Adhyatmam Kim Karma Purushottama Adi Bhutam Cha Kim Proktam Adi Devam Kim Uchyate. I'll now do the word-for-word translation. Please repeat after me. Arjuna Vacha. Arjun said. Kim. What? Tat. That. Brahma. Brahman. Kim. What? Adhyatman, the self. Kim, what? Karma, fruitive activities. Purusha Uttama, O Supreme Person. Adibhutam, the material manifestation. Cha, and. Kim, what? Proktam is called. Adidevam, the demigods. Kim, what? Ujjate is called. Translation by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Arjuna inquired, O my Lord, O Supreme Person, what is Brahman? What is the self? What are fruitive activities? What is this material manifestation? And what are the demigods? Please explain this to me. So I'm going to just take it in sections. If you want to repeat after me. Arjuna inquired, O my Lord, O Supreme Person, what is Brahman? What is the self? What are fruitive activities? What is this material manifestation? And what are the demigods? Please explain this to me. So I'm now going to read the purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Purport. In this chapter, Lord Krishna answers different questions from Arjuna, beginning with, what is Brahman? The Lord also explains karma, fruitive activities, devotional service and yoga principles, and devotional service in its pure form. The Srimad Bhagavatam explains that the Supreme Absolute Truth is known as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. In addition, the living entity, the individual soul, is also called Brahman. Arjuna also inquires about Atma, which refers to body, soul, and mind. According to the Vedic dictionary, Atma refers to the mind, soul, body, and senses also. Arjuna has addressed the Supreme Lord as Purushottam, Supreme Person, which means that he is putting these questions not simply to a friend, but to the Supreme Person, knowing him to be the supreme authority, able to give definitive answers. Okay. Om Jnana Timirandhasya Jnana Jana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvashesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavnebho Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So today we start a brand new chapter, the 8th chapter. And the 7th chapter covered the knowledge of the Absolute. And in the 7th chapter we hear all about Krishna and his inferior energies, his superior energies, the material world, the spiritual worlds. We hear about the 4 kinds of pious people that are attracted to God and the 4 types of miscreants who aren't attracted to God. So the 8th chapter talks about how to know, how to attain him, how to attain the Supreme. That's its title, Attaining the Supreme. So we're going to start by looking at the first verse in more detail, in which Arjuna is expressing his nature, his inquisitive nature, and openly expressing his desire to gain more knowledge about certain things. And he asked the following 5 questions in this verse. Abby, do you want to do a summary of the 5 questions? There are 5 questions in this verse, so we'll just do a quick summary.
Okay, so what is Brahman?
Yes, what is Brahman is the first question. What is the self or Adhyatma? What are fruitive activities or karma? What is this material manifestation or adubhuta? And what are the demigods, Adideva? And he asks a few more questions in the second verse of the 8th chapter. And one of the questions that he asks is, who is the Lord of Sacrifice, or Adiyagya? And these 6 questions, it's interesting that Krishna actually used these 6 particular terms in the preceding verse. So the last verse of the 7th chapter, he uses the terms Adhyatma, Karma, Adibhuta, Adideva, and Adiyagya. So this came up in verse 30. And in verse 30, he relates to Arjuna, those in full consciousness of me, who know me, the Supreme Lord, to be the governing principle of the material manifestation of the demigods and all methods of sacrifice, can understand and know me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even at the time of death. So now Arjuna asks more about these terms in the first verse of the 8th chapter, and he wants to extend his knowledge. So this is an important point for us to understand. Arjuna has received some knowledge from Krishna and is now asking follow-up questions. And that's important for us to ask questions when we don't understand. But how we ask them is important. So Arjuna asked them very submissively. And in the 4th chapter, verse 34, Tad Vidhi Pranipatena, Krishna says to Arjuna, you need to inquire from a spiritual master submissively. So the idea is not to blindly follow when you're not sure, but it's better to ask questions for clarification rather than in a challenging mood, because Krishna has set up this nice process where you can approach the person who has the knowledge, but it's better to do it in a mood of respect and humility and eagerness. So here Arjuna is asking for more clarity and depth to make his understanding more complete. And as Srila Prabhupada pointed out in the purport to this verse, Arjuna is treating Krishna as Purushottam, the Supreme Person, and he's knowing him to be the supreme authority, able to give definitive answers. So in the 2nd chapter, we can see that Arjuna addresses the Lord as his disciple in the 7th verse. He says, now I'm your disciple and a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. So this is similar. He's continuing in that vein of regarding the Lord as the person who can give him all the answers and sweep away the doubts he's having. And in spiritual life, doubts are regarded as a sign of intelligence, as long as we don't make them so big that they become obstacles to spiritual progress. And we are well within our remits of getting any doubts that we have addressed. So any questions so far? No? Fantastic. So I was also listening to Srila Prabhupada's lecture on this verse from June 7th, 1974, and he describes 3 kinds of Purushas. So Krishna is the Purushottam, the Supreme Person, and Purusha means enjoyer. And he describes Uttam, Madhyam, and Adma. So Uttam is the best, the topmost, just like Krishna. So he's the best of the enjoyers. Purusha combined with Uttam is Purushottam. And Madhyam is the super soul, and that's the via medium between us and Krishna. And Adma, which is the 3rd one, refers to us. We're also trying to enjoy. However, the thing is that we can't enjoy independently. Our enjoyment is dependent on so many favorable circumstances in the material world. For example, we have limited senses, and our eyes are limited, which means We can't see in the dark, so we can't enjoy beautiful sights in the dark. So we're very, very limited by our senses. We're restricted by our bodies. Very few of us can eat a whole cake in one go, however delicious it might look. I've tried this. But our stomachs won't allow it without feeling sick. And we're also restricted by our circumstances, by how much money we have, by how good or bad our health is. And if we're unwell, our capacity to enjoy is just not there. And astrological influences also play their part. The way the planets are aligned means that sometimes we won't have things work out for us in the way that we would want them, leaving us unable to have that enjoyment. So there are many, many different controls imposed on our enjoyment. But Krishna, however, his enjoyment is independent. He's the supreme enjoyer, the Purushottam, the supreme controller, the supreme person. So Arjun here is taking the opportunity to address his doubts with the person that can address them, the Supreme. And his 5 questions once again are: what is Brahman? What is the self or Adhyatma? What are fruitive activities or karma? What is this material manifestation or Adibhuta? And what are the demigods or Adideva? So these questions, I think I was listening to a lecture on this, and these questions are described as essay-type questions. They're a little bit more complex in nature. So we're now on the 8th chapter of the Gita, and we're no longer at the beginning stages. And we've now reached the chapters which go in depth into Bhakti Yoga. We had the Karma Yoga chapters 1 to 6, and these are the Bhakti Yoga chapters 7 to 12, and then 13 to 18 is the Jnana Yoga chapters. And so in earlier chapters, we have come across concepts like the self, about fruitive activities or karma, particularly in chapter 3. We've come across, the demigods. So we already know a bit about these topics. But Arjun is asking for further clarification and to extend his knowledge. He's trying to apply the intelligence in a deeper way. So let's take these questions in turn, one by one. The first question is, what is Brahman? So in the purport, Srimad Bhagavatam explains that the absolute truth, or in other words, the Lord, is known in 3 features: Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. But the individual entity is also called Brahman. So Brahman refers to both one of the features of the Lord and describes the living entity or individual soul. Now, I don't want to go too deeply into the subject because Krishna answers what is Brahman in a much fuller way in verse 3, so I don't want to skip ahead too much. But just to go into the subjects a little bit, from the previous chapter, in the purport to verse 729, we learn that Brahman is spirit soul, and it's eternal, it's indestructible. We are Brahman, but Krishna is the supreme Brahman or Para Brahman. So he is the biggest. He's the biggest everything. He has every attribute in its biggest and most unlimited quality and most unlimited quantity. And he is the richest and the wisest and the most famous and the strongest, the most beautiful, the most renounced. And whatever attribute you can see in the material world, even in its most exemplary form in the material world, you might think that a certain person is beautiful, but Krishna will top it. He's more beautiful. Or you might think, that one of these tech billionaires are very, very wealthy, but Krishna has unlimited wealth, so he is just the biggest everything. So that is the Para Brahman aspect of that. And the second question that Arjun asks is about the self or Adhyatma. And what is the self? And we learned in chapter 2 that the self is not the body. So we're not the body with all its, miseries, it's temporary, it's, ignorant. But what could it be? What could the self be? Any ideas? Well, it says here the self refers to the body, the soul, the mind, and the senses. So when we are our real self, our constitutional position, because the purpose of the self is not to enjoy, our constitutional position is to serve, to try not to be the master, but to be the servant. So who do you think we are serving? Krishna, yes, yes. And, kind of we can see that by nature our constitutional position is to serve, because even in our daily lives we're all the servant of someone. You might be serving your husband, your wife, your children, your boss, and, even if you have none of those things, you might be serving a pet. We're sort of cleaning up after them, we're looking after them. So, kind of to serve comes naturally to the living entity. But the aim is not just to serve our families or our career or anything on the material plane, which we can only do on a limited basis, but as you mentioned, to serve Krishna. But again, it's not enough to be the servant of Krishna, because Krishna is happiest when we, serve not him, but his devotees. So we come to the original position as the servant of the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna, the servant of our spiritual masters and all who came before them according to the disciplic succession. So to engage our body, mind and senses is our natural constitutional position, and that's our true self. Okay, and then Arjun has asked another question about fruitive activities or karma. So karma refers to our work, and in the material world we have to work to maintain our body and soul. It's very difficult to maintain our body and soul if we don't engage in some type of work, and it's something we can't escape. Unless we're in the spiritual world, we can't not work. And in the spiritual world, everyone is constantly playing and, having festivals. And it's said there that, every word is a song, every step is a dance, every moment is new, fresh and exciting. So there's not any work there as we know it. Rather, everyone just wants to serve Krishna. But over here, in the material world, work is necessary. And ideally, sort of work is divided into four categories of work. Any idea of the four categories? Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra, the rest. So these categories, how do they get assigned to us? How do we know whether we're a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra? Well, they're not assigned according to our birth. Kind of if our parents are Kshatriyas, doesn't automatically mean that we have a Kshatriya nature. It's basically according to our qualifications and according to our psychophysical nature, our natural propensities. So if we act like a Kshatriya, then we'll be a Kshatriya rather than, sort of acting sort of on the basis of which family we were born in. Which is how the caste system has deviated from the original Varna ashram system. So I'll just briefly describe the categories of Varnas, which help us understand what work we're best placed to do. So you might think you're a Brahmana, and they are the priests and teachers and the intellectuals, and they provide education, they provide spiritual leadership, and they also determine the values and the vision of any society. So, kind of these four categories are likened to Krishna's body, and the Brahmanas would be the head. So they were the thinkers. And traditionally, they'd have their basic needs fulfilled, so they can concentrate on their spiritual tasks, and, they don't need much money. They're not interested in making a lot of money. They're expected to live very frugally. And Kshatriyas would be the arms of the Lord, in the analogy of the body. So Kshatriyas are warriors and the police, and they are leaders and administrators. They're also regarded as the nobility and the protectors of society. And so they've got lots of privileges, but they're expected to display strength of character. And, traditionally in the Vedic system, they displayed the strength of body as well, so they had a lot of bodily strength. And Vaishyas are the farmers, the merchants and the business people. They are the productive class, they produce. And Sudras are the artisans and workers. The Vaishyas are the stomach of the Lord, and the Sudras are the legs. And they're the only section of society allowed to accept employment. So the other Varnas are meant to be occupationally and financially self-sufficient. And if we look at society today, many people are employed. And most of us are Sudras then because we have a boss and we receive a salary. And in the Varna ashram system, the point is to work according to your nature and propensities. So doing work that isn't tailored to your own inclinations, that creates a disharmony in the mind. So, if you have Brahminical tendencies, then it's perhaps best not to undertake the work of the Sudra. It might cause people angst, because we all know when we've been in the wrong job and, the wrong job doesn't fulfill or satisfy us, so it causes mental disturbance. And when Arjun expressed his desire not to fight and to leave the battle and go to a forest and meditate, Krishna advised against it because, it's not his nature. And he tells him that the life of a mendicant, one who renounces everything, one who lives by begging, is just not going to satisfy him. He's a Kshatriya, he's used to ruling a kingdom, he's, part of the ruling class and has a kingdom to preside over. So this is why it's very important, and Krishna advises Arjuna the same way, very important to actually do the work that is of your natural senses. So the nature, looking at the nature of the living entity is important so that they can be well situated in devotional service. And in verse 3, Srila Prabhupada will give a technical definition of karma. And he talks about karma being the activities that develop the material body. So according to the karma or his activities in this lifetime, the living entity will develop the material body for the next lifetime. And according to his works, he may go through life with the body of the man or a demigod or an animal or a bird. So as mentioned, it's important to get to the Brahman level, where we know our constitutional position is as servants of God, and undertake devotional service in order to be able to attain him. And this is what this chapter covers, because if we misuse our independence, we can get a body that is less favorable for us to advance in Krishna consciousness. And so Arjuna then asks the fourth question, what is this material manifestation, or adubhutam? So the material manifestation is the Lord's inferior energy. And in reality, this material manifestation is like a jail for people who've turned away from Krishna because they wanted to be independent Purushas, they wanted to be the enjoyers and the controllers rather than serving Krishna. And Krishna created this material place for them to try and enjoy their desires. But really, it's the same way as the government creates a penal system for those who, deviate from the laws. And the world is a beautiful place. It is the Lord's energy, after all, even though it's his inferior energy. So, we can get carried away by living in the world and, get carried away by its awesomeness and not realize how binding it is. And it's funny because, as a teacher, I often think about how ingenious the Lord's creations are. And, sometimes I'm teaching about the water cycle in science. And, the Lord creates a way to get fresh water for people. And, you start off with the river or the lake and the process of the sun evaporating the water, and it forms water vapors and it turns into clouds, and then it falls back down as precipitation and collects again as rivers and waters. And, it's like a wonderful way of recycling water, and it uses the sun to heat the water, and it uses gravity to make the moisture fall back down to the earth. So it's really an ingenious system of getting us fresh water when we need it. And also the other thing is he created, so many arrangements for everything. And if you look in the material world, you see a lot of variety. For example, if you walk in the park, you'll see lots of different leaves, and so many varieties of leaves, and different shades of green, different shapes and sizes, and and he's created an ingenious system where even the plants get food. It uses the sort of carbon dioxide and sunlight to make food in the plants. So it's just like created arrangements for everything, and everything works perfectly. And so the variety in this world is astounding. There's no two snowflakes are the same. All our fingerprints are different, and we can't comprehend how many times our hearts beat or how many hairs we have on our heads. And so we can look and see this magnificent creation, and the human body is a magnificent machine, and it's brilliant. However, it's still problematic for us. And I was reading a lecture on Bhagavad Gita by Srila Prabhupada on July 28, 1973, who says that even if we become brahmanas, who are in the mode of goodness, who know well that the absolute truth is God, we're still in fact prisoners in the material world. And in the lecture he said, Brahmana means to be situated as a first-class prisoner. A first-class prisoner is also a prisoner. You cannot say that he's free. No, free is different from a first-class prisoner. Sometimes any respectable gentleman, some political offence, is put into jail, just like Gandhi also went to jail, and so many others. But they were given the place, first-class prisoners. They got servant, they got separate bungalow and books and library and all facilities. But they cannot go out of the prison house. They are called first-class prisoners. So to become a brahmana means to become a first-class prisoner. That's all. So in the material world, which isn't our natural home, considering we are Brahman or spirit souls rather than the body, so we're going against the grain a little bit. Our natural constitutional position is to serve, but somehow we've been contaminated by the material conditioning and think that we're here to enjoy. But as we've heard before, there's so many restrictions on our enjoyment that hamper us, and there's so many particular circumstances and miseries caused by the mind and the body, and miseries caused by other people, and also by natural disturbances, as we've been seeing all around the world. So, they all put obstacles on our desire to relish things. And as Prabhupada mentions, even as someone who has realized Brahman, we can only remain a first-class prisoner, someone who isn't free and someone who doesn't attain as much happiness as they'd like to. So the idea is to do devotional service and serve Krishna and his devotees, and that way we can have a chance of attaining the Supreme. And, when we think of Krishna's inferior energy, we think of the material world, and it is mind-blowing, but sometimes I wonder at the spiritual world and how it will be, because that's Krishna's superior energy. And everything there is alive, the trees and the grass. And I was listening to a lecture by my Guru Maharaj, and I remember him saying that Mother Yashoda would ask the rice, which was cooking in a pot, "Are you ready, rice?" And the rice would say, "Not yet." So, that's where our destination is, where everything has a personal form, rather than us stuck in a limited machine, which we can't enjoy. So we are down here in Krishna's inferior energy, but how to get back to the spiritual world? Well, it's not really an external or a physical event. It's, you can't take an aeroplane there or a rocket, and you have to be qualified. But the way out of here is from the inside. It's inside out. You can't manipulate external energies. But it's all about consciousness. So we have to raise our consciousness, not just to the Brahman level, which means acquiring all the qualities in the mode of goodness that a Brahmana should espouse, such as peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, and honesty, and wisdom, and knowledge, and religiousness. We have to actually do devotional service, so serve Krishna personally by chanting, by hearing, and all the 9 processes of devotional service. And later on, this chapter 8, also covers how we can reach Krishna at the time of leaving our body. and which factors influence that. So how we can make sure that when we come to the end of our journey in this body, that we can actually reach Krishna. And Krishna gives us the answer in verse 5, just skipping ahead a little bit. And whoever at the end of his life quits his body, remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this, there is no doubt. So we need to practice remembering Krishna. And it's not possible to remember Krishna at the time of death if we haven't practiced remembering him throughout our lives. And that's why Srila Prabhupada has emphasized, incessantly chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And there might be many impediments, but if we keep chanting, if we develop some of these Brahminical qualities, if we remain engaged in devotional service, we'll be a good position to remember Krishna at the time of death. So Arjun's last question, as pertains to this verse, is what are the demigods? So he does ask more questions in verse 2, but I'll leave that for tomorrow's class. So the demigods are controllers of the different earthly functions, similar to a company where there are heads of different departments. And the owner of the company invests in them power to take care of particular areas, but they're not independent. They run the department, but they're not independent. The owner has the full jurisdiction. So in a similar way, Krishna is in charge, but he gives, different functions to the different demigods. There's 33 million of them, but, there's prominent ones, such as Indra, who's in charge of rain, and Chandra, who's in charge of moonlight, which is really important to make the vegetables succulent. Surya is in charge of the sunlight. And Krishna has empowered the demigods to carry out their particular functions in serving humanity. But in the previous chapter, we learnt that, the aim is not to worship the demigods for temporary or material benefits, but worship Krishna himself in devotional service. And we attain all the results we would have got with the demigods, but we also attain eternal, blissful existence. And as the roots of the tree are watered, and you don't need to water the leaves and the branches separately, so there is no need to worship the demigods separately. Once we worship Krishna, all those results will be attained. In verse 4, Krishna answers this question, what are the demigods, by talking about the universal form of the Lord, which actually includes all the demigods and particular planets that they preside over. And for one who is unable to understand Krishna in his Paramatma form, or as the super soul present in the heart, then, for them, this conception of the universal form is provided. It's a conception that they might be able to understand. But the main point is that Krishna is the supreme goal, and he is the master of all. So Arjuna is asking all these questions, and he's asking these questions to increase his faith in Krishna as the supreme, as Purushottam. And if you look at the material world, even through devotional eyes, you will always see Krishna. And even if, there's destruction, such as with the pandemic that we've recently had, we can see Krishna at every step because, we realize that we're at his mercy and always dependent on him. So the point of this chapter is to get to know is to get to the point where we know Krishna as Para Brahman, as the biggest of everything. We know our relationship with him as his eternal servants, and we either carry out devotional service or give the results of our fruitive activities to him. And, we're understanding that the material manifestation is, while it's a beautiful place, it's also a temporary dwelling place for us. So that was what I had for these questions, and thank you for your kind attention. Are there any questions? Mm.
thoughts on that, like how do you know? Actually, nature, how do you know? Most people aren't like one partner, is what I've heard now. It's very rare to like someone to know like, oh, I'm like completely usually it's like
So that's a wonderful question. I'll just reflect it back to you. So you're asking about the Varna ashram system, and we were saying how important it is to know what Varna you are, and you've heard that most people now are lots of different Varnas. We're not all one, particular Varna, and it's just a mixture. So how do we take that step? How do we understand what our nature is in order to be able to execute our devotional activities with, a sort of more peaceful situation? Have I understood you correctly? Yes? No problem. So it is very difficult because in Kalyug, we are a mixture of Varnas, and as I mentioned, most of us are Sudras, most of us are in employment, and we've got jobs, and it's necessary for us to work. So the idea is not to just give up our jobs and renounce. And in bygone ages, I think they would have the Garbhodan Samskara, before the child would be born, so that there would be, kind of a good soul from, a devotional background. And they would, sort of have particular qualities and proclivities. And they would also make sure that, kind of, when the marriages take place, that kind of there wouldn't be a mixture of varnas within the parents. So kind of as I understand it, then kind of you shouldn't, if you're a woman, a female, you shouldn't marry someone of a lower varna. But of course, no one knows their varna, so we don't make those decisions when we get married, on the varna ashram basis. So yes, we are all a mixture, but still there will be some varnas which predominate in our characters. And I think it's always useful just to do a self-observation exercise and work out what you like doing, what comes naturally, and also ask other people who know you well. And if you're in the mentorship system, ask your mentor, what they've noticed while you're sort of carrying out your duties and what they'd say about your nature. Because it's always good to get a second or a third opinion, because we have so many blind spots about our character, or things that we don't see for ourselves, but other people can spot them in us. And so, yes, I think it's just a case of just asking, kind of your mentors and people who know you well, kind of which do you think the predominant varna is. But yes, it's difficult to actually say, I'm a pure Brahmana, I'm a pure Kshatriya. I don't think anyone is pure anything in this day and age. Okay.
it's not a question, it's just like something you said really nicely, and when you're sick, we have less propensity to enjoy.
Mm.
I just thought that's such a nice analogy for that, because we often say in this kind of like an hospital, daily spiritual health, and I just thought it was nice how that's kind of an analogy, and in the material sense you can see that when we're sick, we can't enjoy it, and like things
Thank you. That was such a wonderful observation. So I'm just going to reflect that back to you. So you were saying that, kind of one of the things that I mentioned was that when we're sick, we can't really enjoy anything in the material world. And actually, sort of Srila Prabhupada has mentioned that, that the material world is like a hospital, and we're all sick because we're not connected to Krishna. And so, yes, our kind of propensity to enjoy is really, really limited. And we can see that, kind of from when we have bodily infections or bodily conditions that we can't really enjoy in this world. And yes, I don't know why, but definitely in my life, thank you for that observation, but definitely in my life, whenever I've tried to enjoy, there's something that always goes wrong. It's never as good as you think it is. And I remember before I came to Krishna consciousness, I was a big tennis fan. And so, I went to Wimbledon, and, it was my desire to go and sit in the centre court and watch a big match. And that desire came to pass. So I watched a big match with the top players, and I was so high up in the stadium that I could hardly see a thing. I could hardly see the ball. And I remember thinking I would have been much better if I'd saved my money and stayed at home and watched it on TV. So, whenever we try to enjoy something, whenever we think we're going to have a good time, there's something always that limits us. Probably in my case, if I'd sort of spent more on a ticket, I could have got closer to the front. But, there's something that is, kind of hampering us, in enjoyment. And it's only when you actually do devotional service that you get the feeling of bliss, which is transcendental, and it's not, a mundane pleasure. So, that's a good thing to try and work for, our devotional service. Okay, so thank you so much. I'm going to bring this discussion of verse 8.1 to a close. So, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grantaraj Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.